This is Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search from my site. I'll be reading from the New York Times. Muhammad Ali died last night. It went public about 10 hours ago. I chose a New York Times tribute after reading a few. The New York Times is very long. I will share my screen and have a still image of that New York Times headline on my screen as I read. This is in part a tribute to a man who had difficulty reading. So I'm going to read 4 people. I wish I'd been up at 1 in the morning when news broke. So I'm a little late. About 10 hours, New York Times. Muhammad Ali dies at 74, a titan of boxing of the 20th century. Muhammad Ali, what's my name? Gabe Johnson. The 3-time world champion boxer Muhammad Ali has died. Current and former New York Times reporters and columnists talk about their memories of him and how he became an international icon. By Robert Lipsyte. It's Lipsyte, Robert Lipsyte. And I think that's that famous name Lipsyte, which might have been the birth name of Ralph Lauren. It's the first time I've seen it in writing. Robert Lipsyte, June 4th, 2016. Muhammad Ali, the 3-time world heavyweight boxing champion who helped define his turbulent times as the most charismatic and controversial sports fighter of the 20th century, died on Friday in a Phoenix area hospital. He was 74. His death was confirmed by Bob Gunnell, a family spokesman. Ali was most thrilling, if not the best heavyweight boxer ever, carrying into the ring a physical, lyrical, unorthodox boxing style that fused speed, agility, and power more seamlessly than any other fighter before him. He was more than the sum of his athletic gifts: an agile mind, a buoyant personality, a brash self-confidence, and an evolving set of personal convictions fostered a magnetism that the ring alone could not contain. He entertained as much with his mouth as with his fists, narrating his life with a pattern of inventive doggerel. Me-wee! Ali was as polarizing a superstar as sports world has ever produced, both admired and vilified in the 1960s and 70s for his religious, political, and social stances, his refusal to be drafted during the Vietnam War, his rejection of racial integration at the height of the civil rights movement, his conversion from Christianity to Islam, and the changing of his slave name, Cassius Clay, to one bestowed by the separatist black sect he joined, Lost Foundation of Islam, were perceived as serious threats by the conservative establishment and noble acts of defiance by the liberal opposition. Loved and hated, he remained for 50 years one of the most recognized people on the planet. Readers note that the New York Times in this online version offers several audio video throughout this. So slideshow, look back at the greatest Muhammad Ali. three-time heavyweight championship, was among the most controversial and charismatic sports figures of the 20th century. In later life, Ali became something of a secular giant, secular saint, a legend in soft-focused. He was respected for having sacrificed more than 3 years of his prime boxing and untold millions of dollars for his anti-war principles. After being banished from the ring, he was extolled from his unself-conscious gallantry in the face of incurable illness, and he was beloved for his accommodating sweetness in public. Photo, 1996. He was trembling and nearly mute as he lit the Olympic cauldron in Atlanta, 1996 photo. That passive image was far removed from the exuberant, talkative, vainglorious 22-year-old who bounded out of Louisville, Kentucky, onto the world stage in 1964 with an upset victory over Sonny Liston to become the world champion. The press called him the Louisville Lip. Louisville Lip. He called himself the greatest. Ali also proved to be a shapeshifter, a public figure who kept reinventing his persona. As a bubbly teenage gold medalist at the 1960 Olympics in Rome, he parroted Americans' Cold War line, lecturing a Soviet reporter about the superiority of the United States. But he became a critic of his country and a government targeted in 1966 with the declaration, "I ain't got nothing against the Viet Cong." He lived a lot of lives for a lot of people, said the comedian and civil rights activist Dick Gregory. He was able to tell white folks for us to go to hell. More Muhammad Ali coverage, but Ali had his hypocrisies, or at least his inconsistencies. How could he consider himself a race man, yet mock the skin color, hair color, and features of other African Americans? Most notably, George Frazier, his rival and opponent in 3 classic matches. Ali called him the gorilla. Long after, Frazier continued to express hurt and bitterness. If there was a super title to Ali's operatic life, it was, "I don't have to be who you want me to be. I am free to be who I want." He made that statement the morning after he won his first heavyweight title. It informed every aspect of his life, including the way he boxed. The traditionalist fight crowd was appalled by his style, kept his hands too low, his critics said, and instead of allowing punches to slip past his head by bobbing and weaving, he leaned back from them. Eventually, his approach prevailed. Over 21 years, he won 56 fights and lost 5. His Ali shuffle may have been pure showboating, but the rope-a-dope, Deborah, I'm glad to hear from you. Good. Deborah, if I called you back in about 30 minutes, would that be okay? Okay, give me just, I sort of have in my mind you have this noon deadline, but I guess today's Saturday, that's different? Okay, all right, very good. I'll talk to you in about quarter after the hour. Thanks, ciao. Over 21 years, he won 56 fights and lost 5. His Ali shuffle may have been pure showboating, but the rope-a-dope, in which he rested on the ring's ropes and let opponent punch himself out, was the stratagem that won the Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman in 1974. The fight in Zaire, now Democratic Republic of Congo, in which he regained his title. His personal life was paradoxical. Ali belonged to a sect that emphasized strong families, a subject on which he lectured, yet he had dalliances as casual as autograph sessions. A brief first marriage to Sonji Ro ended in divorce after she refused to dress and behave as a proper nation wife. She died in 2005. While married to Belinda Boyd, his second wife, he traveled openly with Veronica Porsche, whom he later married. That too ended in divorce. Ali was politically and socially idiosyncratic as well. After the attacks of September 11th, a television interviewer, David Frost, asked him if he considered Al-Qaeda and the Taliban evil. He replied that terrorism was wrong, but that he had to dodge questions like that because I have people who love me, he said. Business around the country and an image to consider. As a spokesman for the Muhammad Ali Center, a museum dedicated and respected Hope of Understanding, which opened his hometown, Louisville, in 2005, he was known to interrupt a fundraising meeting with an ethnic joke. In one, he said, if a black man, a Mexican, and Puerto Rican are sitting in the back of a car, who's driving? Give up? The police. But Ali generated so much goodwill by then that there was little he could say or do that would change the public's perception of him. We forgive Muhammad Ali for his excess, said biographer David Kinder, because we see him and his child in us, and he's foolish and cruel. He is arrogant. If he is outrageously in love with his reflection, we forgive him because we no more can condemn him than condemn a rainbow for dissolving into the dark. Rainbows are born of thunderstorms. Muhammad Ali is both. Cassius Clay started to box at 12. His new Schwinn, $60 Schwinn bicycle was stolen off a downtown street. Cassius Clay, Jr., was born in Louisville, January 17, 1942. Readers note, the New York Times text is very long and it has subtitles. The subtitle of this is the topic switch. It's called Ambition at an Early Age. Cassius Clay was born in 1942 into a family of strivers that included teachers, musicians, and craftsmen. Some of them trace their ancestry to Henry Clay, 19th century representative, senator, and Secretary of State, and cousin Cassius Marcellus Clay, and noted abolitionist. Ali's mother, Odessa, was a cook and a house cleaner. His father, a sign painter and a church muralist who blamed discrimination for his failure to become an artist, a recognized artist. Violent and often drunk, Clay Sr. filled the heads of Cassius and young brother Rudolph, later Rahman Ali, with the teachings of the 20th century black separatist Marcus Garvey, refrain that would become Ali's I am the greatest. Beyond the father's teachings, Ali traced his racial and political identity to the 1955 murder of Emmett Till, a black 14-year-old Chicago who was believed to have flirted with a white woman on a visit to Mississippi. Clay was about the same age as Till, and the photograph of the brutalized dead youth haunted him, he said. Cassius started to box at 12 after his new $60 Schwinn bicycle was stolen off a downtown street. He reported the theft to Joe Martin, a police officer who ran a boxing gym. When Cassius boasted at what he would do to the thief when he caught him, Martin suggested that he first learn how to punch properly. Cassius was quick, dedicated, and gifted at publicizing a youth boxing show, Tomorrow's Champions, on local television. He was soon its star. For all his ambitions and willingness, he worked hard. Education, public and segregated, eluded him. The only subjects in which he received satisfactory grades were art and gym. His high school reported years later, already an amateur boxing champion. He graduated 376 in a 391 size class. He was never taught to read properly. Years later, he confided that he never read a book, neither the ones on which he collaborated with or the Quran. Although he said he had reread certain passages a dozen times, he memorized his poems and speeches laboriously, printing them out over and over again. Muhammad Ali's words stung like a bee to outside the boxing ring. Ali forged his battles with his mouth. In boxing, he found boundaries, discipline, and stable guidance. Martin, who was white, trained him for 6 years, although historical revision and later gave more credit to Fred Stoner, a black trainer in the Smoketown neighborhood. It was Martin who persuaded Clay to gamble your life and go to Rome with the 60s Olympic team despite his almost pathological fear of flying. Okay, Clay won the Olympic heavyweight fight and came home a professional contender. In Rome, Clay was everything the sports diplomats could have hoped for. Handsome, charismatic, black, glad-hander. When a Russian reporter asked him about his racial prejudice, Clay offered him to tell young readers, "We got qualified people working on that, and I'm not worried about the outcome. To me, the USA is still the best country in the world, counting on yours," he added. "It may be hard to get something to eat sometimes, but ain't fighting alligators and living in mud huts." Ali would later cringe at that quotation, especially when journalists hawked back to it as a proof that the Merryman child had been misguided into becoming a hateful militant. Olympian, conscientious objector, and heavyweight champion, how the New York Times covered the career of Muhammad Ali. Of course, after the Rome Games, few journalists followed Clay home to Louisville, when he was publicly referred to as the Olympic nigger and denied service at downtown restaurants. After one such rejection, the story goes, he hurled his gold medal into the Ohio River. But Clay later gave different accounts of that act, and according to Thomas Hauser, author and oral historian, Muhammad Ali, Life and Times, Clay simply lost the medal. Clay turned professional by signing a 6-year contract with 11 local white millionaires. They got the complexions and connections to give me good direction, he said. The so-called Louisville sponsoring group supported him while he was being groomed by Angelo Dundee, a top trainer in Miami. At the mosque there, Clay was introduced to the Nation of Islam, known to the news media as black Muslims. Elijah Muhammad, the group's leader, taught the white people were devils genetically created by evil scientists. On Allah's chosen day of retribution, the mother of the planet would bomb all but the righteousness, and the righteousness would be spirited away. Years later, after leaving the group and converting to Orthodox Islam, Ali gave the Nation of Islam credit for offering black Americans a black is beautiful message at a time of low self-esteem and persecution. Color doesn't make a man evil, he said. It's in the heart and the soul and the minds that count. What's on the outside is only decoration. Clay was introduced to the Nation of Islam while training in Miami in the early 60s and later converted to Orthodox Islam. Reader note, the text is a little mixed up. I copied and pasted so the photo captions look like text. So photo caption, Clay was introduced to the Nation of Islam. I continue. Clay enjoyed early succession against prudently chosen opponents. His outrageous predictions usually rhyme. This is no jive. Cooper will go in 5. Put off many older sports writers, especially since most of his predictions came true. The Englishman Henry Cooper did go down in the 5th round at Wembley Stadium in 1963 after he had staggered Clay in the mouth. The reporter's boo ideal of a boxer was the iconic Joe Louis, but they still wrote about Clay. Younger sports writer raised in an age of Andy Warhol, happenings, and the put-on were delighted by the hype and by Clay's friendly accessibility. In '63, at 21, after only 15 professional fights, he was on the cover of Time magazine. Wrinkling quality of the prose, Cassius Clay is Hercules, struggling through the 12 labors. He is Jason chasing the golden fleece, reinforced the assumption that he was just another boxer being sacrificed to boxers' lust for fresh meat. It was feared that he would be seriously injured by the baneful slugger Liston, a 7-1 betting favorite to remain his title on February 25th, 1964. But Clay was joyously comic. Encouraged by his assistant trainer as a spiritual advisor, Drew Brown, knew as Boondini, Clay mocked Liston as the big ugly bear and chanted a battle cry, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, rumble young man, rumble." It was feared Clay would be seriously injured by the slugger, Stunny Liston. The 7-1 betting favorite retained his title in Miami Beach, but Clay mocked Liston as the big ugly bear and chanted the battle cry, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, young man, rumble." The Beatles, on their first American tour, were in town and showed up for a photo op at Clay's training gym. Malcolm X, a leading minister for the Nation of Islam, had a worrisome presence to many white Americans. There too, with this family members as guests of Clay, whom they saw as a big brother. To the shock of the crowd, Clay trailed the broader line, Liston at 6'3 inches, 210 pounds, and much faster, took immediate control of the fight. He danced away from Liston, vaulted left hooks, and peppered his face with jabs, opening a cut over his left eye. Clay was in trouble only once, just before the start of the 5th round. His eyes began stinging. It was liniment, but he suspected poison. Dundee had pushed him to the ring. 2 rounds later, Lisden slumped on his stool. His left arm hanging uselessly, gave up. He had torn muscles swinging at Clay in vain. Clay, the new champion, capered along the ring apron, shouting at the press, "Eat your words. I shook up the world. I'm king of the world." The next morning, a Clay claim affirmed his rumored membership in the Nation of Islam. He would be Cassius Clay. A few weeks later, he became Muhammad Ali, which he said meant worthy of all praise, most high. That day, he harangued his audience with a preview of what would, over the next years, become a series of long, more detailed lectures about religion and race. This one was about, as he put it, staying with your own kind. In the jungle, lions are with lions and tigers are with tigers, he said. Don't want to go there. I'm not wanted. The only prominent leader to send Ali a telegram congratulations was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I remember when Ali joined the Nation of Islam, Julian Bond, the civil rights activist and politician, once said, the act of joining was not something many of us particularly like, but the notion he'll do it. Then he jumped out there, joined this group that was so desperate by mainstream America to be proud of it, sent a little thrill through you. The thrills gave way to darker thoughts after Malcolm X left the nation and was assassinated on February 21st, 1965. By members of the group, there was talk that Ali had been tactfully complicit. Jack Newifield, a political journalist with the interest in boxing, wrote, if Ali, as the new heavyweight champion, had remained loyal to his mentor and continued to lend his public support to Malcolm, history might have gone in a different direction. Ali, with neighborhood youngsters on the day after he learned he had been reclassified A1. Again, reader note, another photo caption. Ali learning he had been classified A1A by his Louisville Selective Service Board. Reader's note, another subtitle, refusing to be drafted. February 17th, 1966, a day already roiled by the Senate televised hearings on the war in Vietnam. Ali learned that he had been reclassified 1A by his Louisville Selective Service Board. He had originally been disqualified by a substantive score on a mental aptitude test, but the subsequent lowering of criteria made him eligible to go to war. The timing, however, was suspicious to some. The contrast with the Louisville millionaire had run out. The Nation members were taking over as Ali's managers and promoters. Why me? Ali said. The reporter swarmed around the rented Miami cottage to ask about the new draft status. I buy a lot of bullets, at least 3 jet bombers a year, and pay the salaries of 50,000 fighting men with the money they take from me after my fights. But the reporters continued to press him with questions about the war, the geography of Asia, and thoughts about killing Viet Cong. He snapped, I ain't got nothing against the Viet Cong. That remark was front page around the world. In America, the news media responded with mostly unfavorable, if not hostile. The sports columnist Red Smith of the New York Herald Tribune wrote, squealing over the possibility that the military may call him up, Cassius made himself as sorry a spectacle as those unwashed punks who picket and demonstrate against the war. Most of the press refused to refer to Ali by his name. When 2 black contenders, Floyd Patterson and Ernie Terrell, insisted on calling him Cassius Clay, Ali taunted them in the ring by delivering a savage beatings. In April 1967, Ali refused to be drafted as requested. Conscientious objector status. He was immediately stripped of his title by boxing commissions around the country. Several months later, he was convicted of draft evasion, a verdict he appealed. On April 28, 1967, he refused to be drafted and requested conscientious objector status. He was immediately stripped of his title. Again, reader note, this is a photo caption in its duplicate. Several months later, he was convicted in draft evasion. He won a verdict appeal. He did not fight again until he was almost 29, losing 3.5 years of his athletic prime. They were years of personal and intellectual growth, however, as Ali supported himself on the college lecture circuit, offering medleys of Muslim dogma and boxing verses and questions of question and answer sessions that followed. Now the onlyest boxer in history that people asking questions like a senator develop coherent answers. During his exile from the ring, Ali starred in a short-lived Broadway, Big Time Buck White, one of several commercial ventures. There's fast food chains they called Champ Burger, and a mock movie fight with a popular former champion, Rocky Marciano, in which Ali outboxed the slugger until being knocked out himself. In the final round, the broadcaster Howard Cosell, one of Ali's most deadliest, steadfast supporters in the news media, was responsible for keeping him on television, both as an interview subject and as a commentator on boxing matches. As Ali's draft evasion case made its way to the United States Supreme Court, he returned to the ring on October 26, 1970. Through the efforts of black politicians in Atlanta, the fight, which ended in a quick knockout of the white contender Jerry Quarry, was only a tune-up for Ali's anticipated showdown with Frazier, the new champion. But it was a night of glamour and history as Coretta Scott King, Bill Cosby, Diana Ross, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Sidney Poitier turned out to honor Ali. The Reverend Ralph Abernathy presented him with an annual Dr. King Award, calling him the March on Washington, all in 2 fists. The fight at Madison Square Garden with Frazier on the march in 1971 was lived up to expectations as an epic match, with Norm Mailer ringside taking notes for the book that Frank Sinatra Pictures for Later magazine. Ali stood toe-to-toe with Frazier and slugged it out to determine if it proved the heart that he could stand up to punishment. Frazier won a 15-round decision. Both men suffered noticeable physical damage. To Ali's boosters, the money he had lost standing up for his principles and beating him had taken from Frazier proved his sincerity. To his critics, the bloody redemption meant he had finally grown up. The Supreme Court also took a positive view. On June 28, 1971, it unanimously reversed a lower court decision and granted Ali his conscious objector status. Ali was the underdog when he met, reader note, this is a photo caption. I'm getting better at recognizing them. Ali was the underdog when he met George Foreman on October 30th, 1974 in Zaire. But the 8th round, in a blur of punches, knocked out Foreman to regain the title. Reader's note, subtitle, Resurgence and Decline. It was assumed now that Ali's time had passed and the world became a high-grade opponent, the fighter to beat for those establishing themselves. But his time had returned. Although he was slower, his artistry even more refined. He didn't have fights, wrote James Murray of Los Angeles. He gave recitals. He won 13 of his next 14 fights, including a rematch with Frazier, and he lost to George Foreman, a bigger, more frightening version of Liston. Ali was the underdog, smaller and 7 years older than Foreman. When they met October 30th, 74 in Zaire, they ruled by Mobutu Sese Seko. Each fighter was guaranteed $5 million, an extraordinary sum at the time. The fighter also launched the career of promoter Don King and was the subject of Leon Gast's documentary, When We Were Kings, which was released more than 20 years later. Ali attended a special screening along with a hip-hop performance, Radio City Music Hall. The film won a 1997 Academy Award. Ali reveled in the African setting, repeated an aphorism he had heard from Brown, his assistant trainer. The world is a black shirt with a few white buttons. As the fight progressed, the crowd chanted, Ali Bormail, Ali kill him. First out of concern that Ali leaned against the ropes and absorbed Foreman's sledgehammer blows at the time, on shoulders, and then in mounting excitement as Foreman wore himself out in the 8th round in a blur of punches, Ali knocked out Foreman to regain the title. He leaned down to reporters and said, "What did I tell you?" On December 10th, 1974, Ali was invited to the White House for the first time by President Gerald R. Ford, an occasion that's significantly not only a turning point in the country's embrace of Ali, but also a return of the lip. Ali told the president, "You make a big mistake letting me come because now I'm going after your job." Ali successfully defended his title 10 times. In the next year's increasing physical costs, he knocked out Frazier. Their third match, so-called Thriller in Manila, 1975, but the punishment of their 14 rounds, Ali felt close to dying. 78, he lost and regained his titles with Leon Spinks. Freddie Pacheco urged him to quit, noting of slowing his reflexes and slurring his speech and symptoms of damage. Ali refused. In 1980, he was battered and lost champion Larry Holmes. Ali was soon told that he had Parkinson's syndrome. Several doctors had speculated that that was brought on by the many punches to his head. The diagnosis was later changed to Parkinson's disease, according to his wife, Lonnie. She said he had been brought on by Ali's exposure to pesticides and other toxic chemicals at his training camp in Deer Lake, Pennsylvania. But he loved the adoration of crowds, he said. Even though he became vulnerable in ways he couldn't control, he never lost his childhood innocence. His sunny, positive attitude, jokes, pranks, and magic tricks. He wanted to entertain people and make them happy. The New York Times gives a reader's note. New York Times gives a thorough list of additional readings. This has been Tom Duty, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Duty in a Google search from my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, or restful night street. Ciao. Rest in peace, Muhammad Ali.